はい、おはようございます。お待たせいたしました。それではただいまからフォーリンプレスセンターのオンラインプレスブリーフィングを開始いたします。私は本日司会を務めます広報戦略課長の矢野と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you for waiting and thank you for joining us. We would like to now begin the online press briefing hosted by the Foreign Press Center, Japan. I am Yano, Head of Communication Strategy, and I'm happy to be serving as the MC for this event.
2021年の日本の出生率は1899年以降で最小を記録。6年連続の減少となり、歯止めがかからない少子高齢化が日本の将来に大きな不安を投げかけています。日本の子育て支援策や少子化克服のための必要な取り組みとは何か、また安心して子育てができる社会実現のための舵取りはどうあるべきか、世界が注目しております。
In 2021, the number of births in Japan was 842,897, the lowest number since 1899, making the sixth consecutive year of decline. The world is paying close attention to Japan's measures to support child rearing, what initiatives are needed to overcome the declining birth rate, and how to steer Japan towards a society where people can raise their children with peace of mind.
本日は日本と諸外国の子ども政策や子育て支援、少子化対策について長年研究され、2023年4月に発足する子ども家庭庁についても積極的に提言されている株式会社日本総合研究所の池本美香上席主任研究員をお招きし、お話をいただきます。
The FPCJ has invited Mika Ikemoto, advanced senior economist at the Japan Research Institute Limited, who has long studied child rearing policies, childcare support, and measures for declining birth rates in Japan and other countries, to speak on this topic. She has also made various proposals regarding the Children and Families Agency, which will be launched in April next year.
まずはじめに池本さんの方から逐次通訳の時間も含めて50分程度お話をいただき、残りの時間を質疑応答に当てさせていただきます。質問は外国メディアの方からお受けします。質問したい方はパソコンの画面下の Q&A から質問を書き込んでいただくか、手を挙げるのボタンで合図してください。Q&A の書き込みはブリーフィング開始後はいつでも可能です。
First, we will listen to the presentation by Ms. Ikemoto, which will take approximately 50 minutes, including the consecutive interpretation, and the rest of the time will be spent for the Q&A. We will give priority to foreign journalists for the questions. Those who have questions, please write in your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your PCs, or use the raise hand function. The typing into the Q&A box can begin at any time after the briefing begins.
なお、本日のブリーフィングの日本語及び英語の資料がダウンロードできる URL を1時間ほど前に皆様のメールアドレスにお送りしております。資料をお持ちでない方は画面下の Q&A 欄に書き込みをお願いいたします。資料のリンクを記載します。
The document for today's briefing in Japanese and English has been uploaded to the downloadable URL, and the URL has been notified to you approximately 1 hour ago to the registered email addresses. Those of you who do not yet have the documents, please indicate that information in the Q&A box, and then we will send you the link.
本日の通訳者は株式会社サイマルインターナショナルの森岡幹夫さんです。
Today's interpreter is Ms. Morioka Mikiya of Simul International.
それでは池本さん、よろしくお願いいたします。
Ms. Ikemoto, the floor is yours.
ご紹介いただきましてありがとうございます。日本総研の池本と申します。それでは資料を見ながら進めたいと思います。
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I am Mika Ikemoto of the Japan Research Institute. I will share the documents with you as I go through the presentation.
まず今日は、日本の子ども政策と子育て支援策ということで、私は日頃海外の政策と日本を比較しながら日本の在り方について考えていますので、今日は海外との比較で日本の特徴のようなことをお話しできればと思います。
Now, I will speak about Japan's child policies and child rearing support measures. In my daily research, I do a comparative study of the situation in Japan versus the situation in other countries overseas. And during this presentation, I would like to do such comparison in order to illustrate what ought to be the desirable policy and situation in Japan.
で、今日お話しする内容につきましては、まずはじめにこの30年ぐらいの日本政府の取り組みを振り返り、で、その結果として今日本の子ども子育ての現状がどうなっているか、それから国年から追加で日本に指摘されていること、それから私は保育政策の調査が主なテーマになっておりますので、そこの課題を少し掘り下げてご紹介し、最後に子ども家庭庁が取り組むべき課題についてお話ししたいと思います。
In my presentation, I will first of all review the past efforts of the Japanese government in this area over the past 30 years, speak about the status quo, and also touch upon the additional recommendations that Japan has received from the United Nations. My main field of study and research is childcare policies, and therefore I will go deeply into that topic and then conclude by mentioning the expectations for the children and families agencies.
で、資料につきましては、詳しくは、弊社のホームページで、論文が読めるようになっていますので、こちらをご参照ください。
Now, the background documents are readable if you could access the website of our institute, and therefore this is just for your reference.
それではまず日本政府のこれまでの取り組みを振り返ります。
First of all, let us review the initiatives that have been taken by the Japanese government so far.
ここの表は左側に少子化対策、女性の活躍推進に関する、政策の動き、そして右側に子どもの権利に関する動きを整理しております。
On this table, we have listed the measures to cope with the declining birth rate and women's empowerment on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side column, the initiatives or the events regarding the rights of the child.
で、ここの1990年を見ますと、90年に国連の子どもの権利条約が発効したんですが、その年に日本の状況としては、過去最低の出生率 1.57 ショックが、大騒ぎになりまして、その結果、その子どもの権利条約のことが社会の関心からあまり光が当たらずに、もう子供をどうやって増やすかで、女性が仕事を持ちながらどうやって子供を産んでもらえるかっていう、そちらの方向に政策が集中していった経緯があります。
Now, if you could focus your attention to the line for 1990, which was the year that the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child entered into force, that was exactly the same year when the total fertility rate of Japan fell to a record low level of 1.57. And that became a big shock, made it to the headlines of various press reports. And therefore, the entering into force of the convention did not receive due attention. There was not much limelight placed on that news, and therefore the policy of the Japanese government shifted towards how we can enable women to keep working and raise children at the same time in order to uplift the birth rate.
で、具体的には、保育所の、時間延長、それから病気の子どもを預けられる保育を増やすというようなことですとか、あるいは、仕事と生活の調和ということ、それから、それでも出生率が増え 上がってこないということで、結婚、妊娠、出産支援ということで、お見合いを自治体が企画するなどの、そういったところにまで、踏み込むような取り組みがありました。
To explain the situation more specifically, measures were taken to prolong the business hours of childcare centers, increase the number of facilities that would accept children who are ill, improving the work-life balance. But with fertility not being increasing, even with those measures, the government began to intervene into promoting marriages, increasing the number of pregnancies and children delivered per woman. And therefore, many municipalities began to arrange matchmaking for potential couples.
で、最近では、それでも出生率が低迷しているということで、幼児教育の無償化、不妊治療の保険適用などのその経済的支援にも、力を入れている状況です。
However, more recently, since a birth rate is not improving even after taking those measures, the government began to take the initiative of offering infant education free of charge and offering insurance coverage for fertility treatment. In other words, they've also began to offer economic incentives.
で、そのようなことに集中した結果、この右側の子どもに関する取り組みが、ほとんど進まない状況で、国連から第1回、第2回、第3回、第4回と、同じような勧告が繰り返されてきましたし、また、今年は、障害者権利委員会の方からも子どもの問題について指摘がされ、でようやく30年ぐらいが経って、ようやく来年、その子どもの権利条約にのっとって、国が施策をやっていくということを掲げた子ども基本法が施行されたという状況になっています。
As a result of such focus of the Japanese government, there was not much attention given to promoting the rights of the child and the compliance to the Convention of the Rights of Child, which is explained on the right-hand column of this table. And thus, as a result, similar recommendations were issued by the United Nations in their first, second, third, and fourth reports regarding the Convention of the Rights of the Child to the Japanese government. And this year, the Commission on the Rights of People with Disabilities also indicated to the Japanese government the shortfall in terms of the child-related activities and policies. So finally, after a long 30 years, the government began to announce that they would be injecting efforts in order to promote the activities under the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And finally, the Basic Act on the Rights of the Child was enacted in Japan.
で、実際に子どもの権利についてはこのように取り組みが遅れてきましたので、これは、2019年の調査ですけれども、子どもの権利条約について名前だけ聞いたことがある、聞いたことがないという人が、子どもで7割、大人に至っては8割を超えているということで、本当に関心というか知られていない状況になっています。
Now, because of such circumstances, when this survey was done, although slightly outdated, it was in 2019, we asked the respondents whether they knew about the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and 70% of children respondents between 15 and 17 answered that they didn't know the name of the convention, that they have never heard of the convention. And amongst the adult respondents over 18 years of age, a high proportion, as high as 80%, responded that they didn't know the name, that they never heard of the convention.
そのようなことで、今、日本の子ども子育てがどうなっているかということで、少しデータをご紹介しますと、まず 政府はとにかく保育施設を増やして女性の就業率を上げるというところにフォーカスしてきましたので、そこについては、結果が出ているということで、女性の就業率はこの10年で 10% 以上上がっていますし、保育所の利用率も1、2歳児で、ついに50% を超えるところまで、大量に保育所整備をしてきたという状況です。
So now in the next section, I would like to review the current status of childcare and child rearing. Because of such a background and the policies taken by the government, the number of children facilities did increase, and the labor participation by women also increased. And over the past 10 years, the employment rate of women had gone up by more than 10%. So those efforts did deliver results. And as also indicated here, the ratio of usage of children who are either 1 or 2 years old at child care centers had also increased to over 50%.
ところが、子どもの状況を見ますと、まず子どもの貧困率が高止まりしているということで、これは国際的に見ても高くなっていますし、特に一人親の世帯につきましては、2世帯に1世帯は貧困だという状況があります。
But if we actually take a glance on the current stat of children, the children poverty rate is high, relatively high by any international standards as well. And when we look at the single parent families poverty rate, 1 out of 2 families are in poverty of single parent families.
それから、あと教育格差の拡大も懸念されていまして、幼児教育無償化というのを数年前に行いましたけれども、これもともとは保育料は負担できる範囲の保育料になっていましたのに、無償化したということは全く負担感を感じていない高所得層が無料になっただけで、結局その浮いたお金が高所得層はまた習い事に充てるですとか、むしろ教育格差拡大に働いている面があります。
And in fact, the education gap is widening. Although preschool education was made free of charge, even before this was made free of charge, the level was relatively affordable. So the benefits were only felt by high-income families, and therefore, now that high-income families no longer have to pay for preschool education, they are using that money that they have saved to provide special education and special lessons to their children, which has resulted in further widening of the education gap between low-income families and high-income families.
それから保育施設や学校の安全性という面で、いろいろ園バスの中で置き去りにされて死亡した例が続いたりですとか、あるいは保育士や教員による体罰、あるいは性被害などの報道もなくなってはいない状況です。
And also, there is still problems regarding the safety of childcare facilities. You've all probably heard the news of children being left behind in childcare facility buses, leading to fatalities. And we have also seen the continuation of accidents involving children receiving corporal punishments or sexual abuse by caregivers and teachers.
だから最近はコロナの影響で、地域でその親も子もなかなか人と会うことが難しく孤立化しているという問題も、深刻になっています。
More recently, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are seeing the deepening of the issue regarding isolation of both parents and children in local communities because they cannot meet with other people.
少しデータを見ますと、女性の就業率が、これ日本はもうすでに OECD を上回ったという国際比較のデータです。
And if we look at some of these statistics, this indicates that Japan's women's employment rate is already above the OECD average.
で出生率の方は、先ほどもご紹介ありましたが、このように、低迷していまして、出生数が81万人にまで減っている状況です。
As you can see on this graph, the fertility rate continues to decline or is staying at a low level, and the number of birth is as low as 810,000.
でこれは数年前の推計からもさらに下振れしている数字でして、非常に出生数の先行きは心配されている状況です。
This actual number of births is lower than what had been estimated a few years ago, and therefore there is deep concern over the number of births.
から子どもの状況として、児童相談所における児童虐待相談対応件数がこのようなカーブで急増していて、年間20万件を超えるようなことになっていて、で年間虐待で死亡する子どもが50人を超える状況となっています。
And the number of cases of child abuse consulted at child guidance centers is increasing quite rapidly, as indicated on this chart. And what is more concerning is that the number of fatalities caused by child abuse is over 50 per year.
から保育施設も、数も増やしているんですけれども、そこでの重大事故ですね、30日以上治療にかかるような事故に遭う子どもがこのようなオレンジのところですが増えている状況です。
Now, as I mentioned, although the number of childcare facilities is increasing, we are seeing the increase of major serious accidents that require the victim to be treated for 30 days or longer, as represented in the orange bar.
それから小学校もなかなか安全な状況になっていないということで、これは子どもの暴力行為発生件数がここ10年ぐらいで急増しているという状況です。
And we are seeing problems in elementary school where there has not been much improvement in the situation, and the number of violence amongst incidents of violence in elementary schools has been increasing over the past 10 years, as shown on this chart.
そして今、不登校というのがどんどん増えていることが注目されていますが、これ、小学校というのはこれまであまり不登校というのは少なかったんですが、これもここ10年ぐらいで急増している状況にあります。
There's now attention paid to the increasing number of truancy, non-attendance at elementary schools. In the past, there had not been many cases of non-attendance at the elementary school level. However, it has been rapidly increasing during the past 10 years, and therefore there's deep concern over this matter as well.
そして、児童生徒の自殺者数も右肩上がりになっていまして、これはコロナの影響で、特に2020年は過去最高になりましたけれども、コロナの影響だけでなく、それ以前から子どもの数自体は減っていますので、それに対して自殺者数がじわりじわりと増えているというのは非常に深刻な状況と考えています。
Now, number of suicide by children is also a deep concern. In the case of 2020, it is assumed that the increase was partly due to the COVID pandemic. However, that is not the only reason, because even before the COVID pandemic, in the circumstances of the number of children declining, the number of suicide incidents of children had been increasing gradually, which is a very deep concern.
次にですね、国連から今日本が何を言われているかということについて2点お話をしたいと思います。
Next, I would like to focus on two recommendations that Japan has been receiving regarding this area by the United Nations.
一つは、子どもの権利条約を批准した国には、この子どもコミッショナーなどと呼ばれる子どもの権利が実現しているかを監視し、問題があれば改善を提言する、そういった子どもの権利のための独立機関がすべての国に必要だと言っているわけなんですが、それが日本にないということです。
Now, countries that have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child are to establish an independent institution that would supervise and check on regular basis whether the country has been complying with the convention, whether the rights of the child are being protected, and if not, where where improvements are needed. And such recommendations are to be provided by such independent organization, which is non-existent in Japan.
で、これがないことについて、これ先ほど言ったその国連から何度も設置が勧告されているんですけれども、それに対して日本政府は、日本にはこの1948年にできた人権擁護員制度というものがあり、で、ボランティアがそういった人権相談に乗る制度があるので、それで十分だ。そして、そこの人権擁護委員の中に子どもの人権専門委員も任命しているということを説明していました。
Now, as I have already mentioned, the United Nations on several occasions have been indicating this to the Japanese government that such organization needs to be established. And in response, the Japanese government has been asserting that we in Japan have the system of human rights commissioners, which was installed in 1948, and that these volunteers also provide protection to the children as well, and that amongst such human rights commissioners, Japanese government has also appointed special commissioners for children's rights as well.
しかし、実際にこの子どもの人権専門委員になった人が言ってらっしゃったんですけれども、子どもや親にその存在が知られていない上、予算もスタッフも権限もないため活動ができないということもあり、2008年にこの子どもの人権専門委員制度自体はもう廃止されてしまっている状況です。
However, when we did a hearing to these people who have actually been appointed as special commissioners for children's rights, they were saying that the system is not known amongst children nor parents, and they are not granted sufficient amount of budget, staff, and are not given authority, so they cannot really function as they ought to be. And therefore, as a result, this system of special commissioners for children's rights was abolished in 2008.
で、コミッショナーについて、コミッショナーというのは何も子どもに限ったものではなくて、国連人権条約に認められている権利、例えば女性ですとか、障害者とか、そういったものについて人権を守るための機関が必要だというふうに国連が言っていて、でもその中に子どもの権利も一つ含まれるという考え方になっています。
Now, talking about these commissioners, they work not only to protect the rights of the child, but to protect all rights listed under the United Nations Convention on Human Rights that covers rights of women, rights of people with disabilities, and rights in general. And amongst those rights of the Human Rights Convention, children's rights are also included.
そして、このいろんな女性障害者などを含む、国内人権機関というものを設置している国が増えていまして、で、その、国内人権機関のネットワーク参加国が、2021年118となっていますが、ここにも、日本にはそういうものがないので参加していない。で、一方、ヨーロッパの方は、子どもの、そういった人権機関のネットワークを1997年に結成しているような状況です。
Now, if we look around the globe, we now have the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, and in 2021, the number of participating countries was 110. However, Japan is not a member of this global alliance because there is no independent organization in Japan, and Europe has proceeded even further to establish a network dedicated to the protection of children's rights in 1997.
で、もう一つですね、日本にはなくて海外にあるものとして、行政監視機関のオンブズマンというのがあります。
Another system that is not existing in Japan but exists in other countries is the ombudsman system to monitor government institutions.
で、これは行政機関に対して市民から苦情とか不満などが訴えが上がってきますと、それを調査して改善を促すという、機関ですが、これも国際オンブツマン協会というのがあり、今たくさんの国が参加しているんですが、日本にはそういったオンブツマンがない。で、実は日本もここに参加していますが、日本が参加している機関は、この、ですね、ボランティアで行っているその行政相談員というのが日本にはありまして、その行政相談員の全国組織がこのオンブズマン協会に参加しているということなんですが、少しその海外のオンブズマンとは日本の状況は異なっているという状況です。
In 1987, the International Ombudsman Institute was established and many countries became a member. And Japan is a member to this International Ombudsman Institute. However, Japan in IOI is represented only by a national organization of the people who are referred to as administrative counselors, who are unpaid volunteers commissioned by the Japanese government.
そして、ですから、ニュージーランドを例にとりますと、ニュージーランドにはこの、例えば自治体ですとか学校などのその行政機関に対する不満はオンブズマンが受け付け、さらに、子どもコミッショナーというのも別に設置されていて、そこは民間の活動についても、苦情を受け付けたり調査などを行うという、二重に2つの組織で子どもを守っていくというふうな状況になっています。
Japan is without such ombudsman system that is supposed to conduct surveys over administrative institutions and recommend improvements when there are shortfalls. And in other countries, for example, if we take a look at New Zealand, they have ombudsman at the municipality level that would be accepting complaints regarding education boards and making recommendations regarding local governments and education boards. And separately from the ombudsman system, they have a system of children's commissioners separately that are also receive complaints and conduct interventions about private sector activities. So in the case of New Zealand, they already have a double-tiered system or two organizations that deal with the rights of the child.
日本でも、子どもコミッショナーのような組織を自治体レベルで、作るところが増えていますが、ただ、市町村数1724に対して、 実際あるのは38にとどまっておりますし、また自治体レベルでやっているのは、本当に深刻な状況の相談に乗るといったところにとどまっていて、政策提言ですとか子どもの状況を調査するといった踏み込んだところにまでは行えていない状況です。
There are some local governments and municipalities in Japan that have established independent institutions to protect the rights of the child. However, such number of municipalities is small, only 38 out of the total number of 1,724 municipalities in Japan. And even those municipalities with such independent institutions only deal with cases that are extremely serious, and they have not gone as far as making policy recommendations or conducting overall surveys and research.
それから国連から指摘されているもう一つの課題として、インクルーシブ教育に日本は逆行しているということがあります。
Another point that the UN has been pointing out regarding Japan was that Japan is receding when it comes to inclusive education.
インクルーシブ教育というのは、障害のある子どもだけを取り出して分離して教育することはやめようという、そういう国際的な流れなわけですが、日本はその、障害のある子どもだけを対象とする学校、学級施設というのの利用が今急増している状況で、その背景には通常の学級というのが非常に職員の配置が手薄なので、いじめがあったりということで、心配なので、あえてその、障害のある家庭も、その分離教育を選ばざるを得ないような状況にもなっています。
Now, inclusive education is about stopping segregation. In other words, carving out disabled children and educating them in a segregated manner should be ceased. That is the recommendation by the United Nations regarding inclusive education. But in Japan, we are seeing rapid increase in the use of special schools and classes dedicated only to children with disabilities because parents are concerned that the number of teachers per student is low in ordinary schools, and therefore there's higher level of concern for bullying in standard ordinary schools, and therefore these families have no choice but to send their children with impairments to those special classes.
そしてまたその分離された教育の質の問題も、指摘されていまして、そこでその障害のある子どもだけを対象とする、学級の、でそういう暴言や体罰がある、あるいはその通常の学級に入れるために子どもに薬を服用させるケースが増えているといったそんな指摘も出てきています。
There's also a concern regarding the quality of support offered in those special segregated education courses. Now, there's a very deep concern regarding the verbal abuse or corporal punishment and increased use of psychotropic drugs to control the children in those classes.
それから障害のある子どもの親の負担も極めて重いものになっていまして、まずその施設を探すところ、あるいはそこの施設に入る場合に送迎や付き添いなどを求められる。それからその非常に心理的な負担ですね。常に申し訳ないっていうふうに謝らなければいけないとか、あるいは非常に孤立してしまうとか、そういった問題がなくなっていません。
Another issue is the burden on parents of children with disabilities being extremely heavy. it might be difficult for them to find such facilities, and even if they are successful in finding facilities that would accept their children, they would have to drop off or pick up their children, or in some cases accompanying their children as they receive such support. That leads to extremely heavy mental burden because these parents constantly need to be apologetic to the society, and they tend to become isolated.
こちらが、そういう分離教育を受けている子どもが増えていることを示すグラフで、一番上の部分は、通級による指導というのは、普通の学級に所属しながら、一部、別の、サポートを受けるということなので、そこはインクルーシブ教育なんですが、下の学校がもう別の学校に通う、あるいは同じ学校の中でも別の学級に所属するという子どもが今増えている状況になっています。
Now, this diagram indicates the situation regarding the number of students in special support education. The very top portion of the bars represent inclusive education, where these children with disabilities will be enrolled in ordinary schools, but will be receiving partial education separately as special support. So in a way, this could be considered as inclusive education. However, the bottom two sections of each bar represents children that are enrolling in segregated classes dedicated to children with disabilities, or schools that specialize in special assistance education only for children with disabilities. And that the number of children enrolling in those two segments is increasing.
で次に保育制度の課題について大きく3つお話ししたいと思います。
Next, I would like to speak about challenges in the childcare system, and I will focus on three main challenges.
一つが質の確保に向けた取り組みが不足しているということで、今この保育所に通う子どもの数はどんどん増えているわけですが、その質確保の制度が非常に心配で、一つここに挙げましたのが海外にあって日本がない制度。一つはこの保育者の性犯罪歴などをチェックしてから採用するという仕組みが日本にはありません。
The first challenge that we are faced with is securing the quality for childcare. And currently, as I indicated, the number of children enrolled in such childcare facilities is increasing. However, there's a deep concern of the quality of support they are receiving. One mechanism that exists in other countries but is not existent in Japan is to check the background of the support providers, the caregivers, whether they have been involved in any sexual assault previously, and doing a thorough background check, which is non-existent in Japan.
右側が保育の質の評価機関で、これはイギリスやニュージーランドでは、国の機関がすべての施設を定期的に訪問してチェックして、その結果をホームページで公表しているわけなんですが、日本の場合は、そういったきちんとした定期的評価が実施されていなかったり、されていてもその結果が公表されていないという状況があります。
On the right-hand side, there's a pie chart that explains the situation regarding institutions to evaluate the quality of childcare. In such countries as the United Kingdom and New Zealand, they have nationwide organizations that would cover all of such childcare centers on regular basis in order to evaluate the quality of support provided, and the results are disclosed and released on their websites. However, in Japan, there is no such institution to evaluate the quality of childcare in some areas. And even if there are such institutions to evaluate, they usually do not disclose the results of their evaluation to the public.
そしてこのグラフは弊社で、保護者向けにそういった制度が日本にも必要ですだと思うかと聞いたところ、やはりその保護者から見るとそういった制度が日本にも欲しいという意見が多数を占めています。
Now, this pie chart indicates the results of a hearing that we had done at our institute, asking parents whether they think that such organization is required in Japan as well. And as you can see, majority of the responding parents said that they want to see such organization established in Japan. They think we need such institution in Japan.
そして今日本の、これも保護者に聞きますと、もっと子どもが通う施設に体を動かすこと、子どもの意見を聞くこと、自然と触れ合うこと、もっと子どもが自由に選んだ遊びをすることをもっとやってほしいという声が強くなっています。
And this also describes the will of the parents on how they hope that their hope regarding what the child care centers would be doing in way of support to their children. And many respondents said that they want child care centers to provide support to have their children do more exercise, listen to the opinions of the children, offer more opportunities for the children to be exposed to nature, or allow the children to play games of the children's choice.
で、子どもの意見の尊重という保護者のニーズがあるわけですが、これは子どもの権利条約を踏まえれば、当然保育施設において取り組むべきことで、例えばノルウェーなどではもうその法律の中で幼稚園の子どもの意見をきちんと聞くということが掲げられていますが、日本ではそこがあまり注目されていない。というのはその背景と、すいません、そこまでで。
じゃあ、1個戻っていただけますか。
はい。
And regarding the respect to the children's opinion, which was one of the strong requests of the parents, under the Convention on the Rights of the Child, this is something that is indicated as something that the child care centers ought to be doing. And in countries such as Norway, they've enacted laws that require kindergartens to listen to the voices of the children as part of the children's rights. However, this area has not received sufficient attention in Japan.
と言いますのは、学校とかのその先生がやはり子どもの権利条約を知らないという実態もあります。
A part of that is due to the fact that school teachers are not aware of the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
それから、そう知らないということなんですが、知っていたとしても、なかなか保育者が今の処遇では十分な対応が子どもたちに対してできないという状況もあります。
So many of them are not aware of the convention, and even if some are aware of the convention, the actual situation on the ground is such that based upon the level of treatment these caregivers receive at the moment, it would not be possible for them to fully ensure the protection of the rights of the child.
一つは給与格差が学校教員と保育者の給与格差が日本は非常に大きいと指摘されています。
One problem regarding the treatment of the caregivers is the gap between childcare workers and school teachers. The salary gap in Japan is quite wide.
さらに、保育者1人が担当する子どもの数が多すぎるという問題で、この4、5歳児を1人で30人まで見られるという基準は70年以上変わっていません。
And another issue is the high number of children that one caregiver has to look after. And for 4 and 5 years old, the standard is up to 30 children per caregiver, and this standard has remained unchanged for longer than 70 years.
で、もう一つはその保育時間が長いっていうことも保育者の負担になっていますが、これは海外のようにその親の柔軟な働き方が普及していないため、すべて保育の方でカバーしなければいけないという状況にもなっています。
Another issue is the long working hours for childcare givers. But this is partly due to the fact that the parents' working hours has not become as flexible as other countries, forcing the childcare centers to have their workers work for long hours because of the inflexibility of the working style of the parents.
それからもう一つ、保育の、課題としては、そのいろいろな施設類型がありまして、その、補助金に差があったり、配置基準に差があるということで、すべての子どもが、同じような質の保育を受けられないような状況にもなっています。
Now, another problem that is often cited is the disparity in subsidies and the number of workers placed, depending on the category of the facility, not allowing all children to receive equal quality of support.
これは、認可保育所と認可外の施設の、保護者の、満足度を調査したものですが、明らかに、そういう補助金が少ないところの保護者の満足度が低くなっています。
This diagram indicates the satisfaction level of the parents whose children enroll in licensed facilities versus non-licensed facilities. And it is obvious that those whose children are enrolled in facilities that receive only low level of subsidies would be unsatisfied with the support.
それからもう一つ海外との違いでは、日本は先生の力だけで質を高めようという傾向が強く、海外のように親を保育の生産者と位置づけ、親のアイディアだとか、ボランティアを保育に生かして質を高めていくという取り組みがとても弱くなっています。
Now, another difference between Japan and the other countries is the fact that in Japan, we try to secure the quality of childcare only through the efforts of the teachers or the caregivers. On the other hand, in other countries, parents are considered as producers rather than consumers of childcare services, and they actively solicit the ideas of the parents or engage the parents to be involved in the support as volunteers in order to improve the quality of support given to children.
でその背景には、日本は子どものための保育ではなく、女性がいかに長時間働けるかという観点で保育制度を捉えてきたために、親に負担をかけない保育が推進されてきたということがあります。
One of the reasons for this problem is because the childcare system was designed in Japan, not truly for the purpose of supporting children, but for the purpose of enabling women to work longer hours. And therefore, the focus in the establishment of childcare regime was placed on minimizing the burden on the parents.
でそのために日本では子どもの預かりが中心になっ ていて、海外にあるような保育施設を通じた親への支援が十分ではありません。で、海外では例えば親が、過ごせるカフェコーナー、ペアレントルームがあったり、親がつながれるようなリクリエーションの機会などがある保育施設もあると聞いています。
And therefore, Japanese childcare facilities only function as places where parents can leave their children behind. On the other hand, childcare facilities in other countries would also be providing support to the parents of these children by offering cafes for parents or parent rooms, or in some cases, organizing events in order for the parents to get together and exchange views.
で、2つ目の保育の課題としては、すべての子どもに保育を受ける権利が保障されていないという問題です。
Now, another challenge in the area of childcare is the right of receiving childcare is not granted to all children.
多くの国では保育は教育施設と位置づけられ、すべてのその親の就労の有無にかかわらず利用できるようになっていますが、日本では3歳未満の専業主婦家庭は保育所を利用することができません。
In many other countries, child care support or child care centers are considered part of the education, and therefore it is granted to all children of all families, regardless of the income level of families. But in the case of Japan, families with one full-time stay-at-home parent whose child is under 3 years of age are disqualified to use daycare centers.
から待機児童も減りましたが、いまだになくなっていませんし、あと、障害などの理由で入園を断られるケースも、なくなっていません。
And although the number of children on the wait list has declined, it has not been eliminated, and we still see cases of parents being rejected at these facilities for reasons that their children have disabilities.
で、実際に保護者の方は、3歳未満に親の就労によらず通えるようにすべきだという賛成が過半数を占めています。
Now, we asked the parents their views on whether this requirement of having both parents working for children of younger than 3 years of age be abolished. And the majority of the parents responded that families with both parents working with a child of younger than 3 years ought to also be qualified as well.
それから3つ目の保育制度の課題として、この財源の効果的な使用ができていないということをご紹介したいと思います。
Now, let me come to the third challenge of not being able to effectively use the funding.
保護者のアンケート結果では、子どもと過ごす時間がもっと欲しいという保護者が3人に1人ぐらいいますが、そういった柔軟な働き方を請求する権利がまだ保障されていなくて、その分を保育時間の長時間化でそこにコストがかかってしまっているということです。
Now, according to a survey of parents, 1 out of 3 parents responded that they want to spend more time with their children. However, because in Japan, there is still not a flexible scheme for the style of working for parents as being granted as right, that has become a cost and has led to the prolongation of the working hours for caregivers.
予防 的な施策に投資するという視点も海外と比べて弱くなっていまして、深刻化する、例えばですね、保育所というのは親が仕事を失うと保育所から出なければいけないという状況になって、ますます貧困に陥ってしまうんですが、逆に親が無職の場合でも受け入れて、そこで就労を後押しして貧困問題の解決につなげていくということも必要ではないかと思っています。
Also, Japan is not making enough investments in preventive policies. To give one example, if the parent loses the job, then the child also will have to leave from the child care center, and therefore that family will become even poorer. So we believe that we need a system where child care centers also accept children of parents who are without jobs, so that parents can focus on finding jobs and improve the poverty situation as well.
それから、事務コストの削減も、進めるべきで、日本は、幼稚園、保育所と所管省庁が異なっていて、行政の事務手続きが、非常に煩雑になっていますが、そこも、削減の余地があると思っています。
We also believe that administrative costs must be reduced. Different ministries and agencies supervise elementary or preschools versus kindergartens, and therefore that has led to an increase and comes in the cumbersomeness of the various procedures, which should be streamlined.
で、これは保育所と幼稚園の所管省庁一元化につきましても、保護者は賛成しているという状況です。
Now, this diagram indicates that the parents are for the centralization and consolidation of ministry in charge of kindergartens and daycare centers, that they should be supervised by the same government office.
で最後に子ども家庭庁への期待ということですが、子ども家庭庁と合わせて、子ども基本法というのが、できたことは非常に良いことだなというふうに思っています。
Let me conclude by touching upon the Children and Families Agency. And along with the plan to establish this agency, the basic law on children was enacted, which was a positive development.
で、この基本法は、子ども権利条約を批准した90年代にすでに提案をされていたものなんですが、ようやく、子どもの権利条約の精神にのっとるということをきちんと明記した基本法が、できたということは、今後非常に期待が持てるところだと思っています。
Now, already back in the 1990s, when the convention was ratified, there was already a proposal to enact such basic law. And finally, the basic law was enacted explicitly, having the words "in the spirit of the Convention on the Rights of the Child," which is major progress, and therefore that gives us hope regarding the activities to be pursued in this area.
で、子ども家庭庁は、ただ、幼稚園を含む学校教育は文部科学省に残されたままというところで、不安は残るわけですが、一応、子ども家庭庁の長が、関連省庁に協力を求められる権限を付与するというところがつきましたので、子ども基本法に沿って、子ども家庭庁が、政策を強力に子どもの立場に立った政策を推進していくことを期待しています。
However, one concern is that the school education, including kindergarten, will still remain under the jurisdiction of MEXT, even after the inauguration of the Children and Families Agency. However, the commissioner of the agency, the head of the agency, will be granted authority to consult and ask for cooperation to other ministries and agencies regarding regarding various matters concerning children and families based upon the basic law. And therefore, that gives us hope that there would be coordination.
ということで、最後に、今回安心して子育てできる社会ということで、少子化の観点からそういうことが期待されるわけですが、親が安心というよりは子どもが幸せな社会を作ることが今日本の課題だというふうに考えています。
Finally, we are seeking to establish society in which children can be raised with peace of mind in the midst of low birth rate. And this society is a society where rather than the peace of mind of parents to be focused, a society in which children can live happily.
以上です。ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for your kind attention.
はい、池本さんどうもありがとうございました。日本における子どもをめぐるさまざまな課題、とりわけその人権を含む、権利の問題について、国際的な視野で、大変詳細にご説明いただきました。どうもありがとうございました。
Ms. Ikemoto, thank you very much. You touched upon the various challenges regarding childcare and child support, especially focusing on various rights, including human rights, and the comparison with the global community. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation.
それでは質疑応答に移りたいと思います。質問は外国メディアの方からお受けします。画面にある Q&A の機能を使って質問を書き込むか、手を挙げるのボタンで合図をしてください。私が指名した方は所属と名前を述べてから質問をしてください。
We now would like to proceed to the Q&A, and we will give priority to foreign media in asking questions. Please either type in your questions using the Q&A function on the screen or use the raise hand button. When appointed by myself, please identify your name and affiliation and then proceed to your question.
はい、それではまず、事前に提出いただいた質問から、ご紹介します。
At the outset, I would like to share with you the questions that have been submitted in advance.
シンガポールのストレートタイムズのウォーター・シム記者から、の質問を英語でまず紹介します。
There was a question submitted by Mr. Walter Sim of the Straits Times, which I will read in English.
Japan has rolled out a series of measures like child care leave, free education, subsidized child rearing expenses, and seemingly to no avail. Why have all of these failed to build a society where people can raise their children with a peace of mind?
日本は、育児休業、教育無償化、育児費用補助などの施策を次々と打ち出したけれども、効果がないように見えます。なぜ安心して子育てができる社会が実現しないのでしょうか。
一つは標準的な子育てに対しては支援が進んでいると思うんですけれども、例えばそこに当てはまらなくてとても困っている人に対して非常に冷たい状況が変わっていないからではないかと思っています。ですから万が一こういうことになったらっていう時に不安が非常に強いということで、海外では障害のある子どもが生まれたとしても、きちんとその子も普通の学校に入れて、みんなと仲良くやれるっていうイメージが持てるんですけれども、もうそこで苦労している人がたくさんいると、本当に怖くてというかですね、例えば先ほどの性犯罪の、保育施設での性犯罪なども、めったにないことではあるんですけども、そこをなくそうという取り組みがないので、そういう不安材料がまだまだたくさんあるっていうところが大きいんではないかなと思っています。
Thank you for the question. In the case of support to ordinary or standard childcare initiatives, there has been progress in the support offered to childcare in general. However, there's still very little support to those who fall outside of the scope of ordinary children or ordinary childcare who are truly troubled. And therefore, parents are extremely concerned what would happen to their children who fall outside the scope of such ordinary childcare. And in the case of other countries, even if the child that is born with disabilities, the parents can easily imagine the child enrolling in ordinary schools and becoming friends with other students and enjoying life. But at that instance, when a child is born with a disability, then the parents are already deeply intimidated and become fearful of what would happen to their children. And as I partly touched upon, there's no specific initiative to deal with sexual crimes occurring at childcare centers, although the number of incidents is extremely low. But there is no initiative to eliminate such incidents on the part of the government. And therefore, there's many reasons for children and the parents of the children to become concerned.
はい、ありがとうございます。それでは次に、Q&A に寄せられた質問を一つご紹介いたします。ラジオフランスの西村かりんさんからです。
Thank you very much. Then let me proceed to one question that has been submitted in the Q&A box, and this is by Ms. Nishimura Karin of Radio France.
興味深いプレゼンテーションありがとうございます。少子化の問題についての質問です。子供を産まない女性が多くなってきた原因は、経済力の弱体か、将来への不安があるとよく言われます。経済力の問題だけなら、対策として国や自治体がお金を支給すれば、少子化の問題を解決できるはずですが、今まで支援が増えてもなかなか解決できませんでした。根本的な他の原因がありませんか？人生の選択肢としての子供を産まない生活を選ぶ人が増えていると思いませんか？つまり子供を産む人生のあり方を否定する女性やカップルが多くなったという状況ではないでしょうか。という質問です。
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. There are many points that I would like to ask, but we'll focus on just one point. And this is a question regarding the low birth rate. It is often said that the big reason why couples or women are not giving birth to children is because of the concerns over the economic future. And if it's just a problem of the economic strength, then a good countermeasure would be for the national government or municipalities to provide financial support, and that should lead to the resolution of the issue pertaining to low birth rate. However, so far, despite the support that these public entities have offered, this problem remains unsolved. Don't you think there are other fundamental reasons? Don't you think that a higher number of people are choosing lives without children upon their own choice? In other words, don't you think that there are more women or couple who deny life of having children?
はい。日本で子供を育ててる人、また子供が幸せそうに見えないっていうのが一番の少子化の問題ではないかというふうに思っています。本当に例えばうるさくしたら謝らなければいけないとか、例えばバスに乗るときにベビーカーで乗せると嫌な顔をされるとか、もちろん一般の人たちにも余裕がないっていうようなこともあるんですけれども、やはりそういう嫌な思いをするとか、本当に親の責任にされてしまうっていうことがあって、だから 安心してもいないし、楽しそうでもないし、で、子供も先ほどもありましたように、不登校だったり、暴力だったり、いじめだったりってことで、もう辛い経験がたくさんあるので、そういう中でこういう子育てがしたいっていうイメージが、もはや持ちにくくなっているんではないかなというふうに思います。
I think the biggest problem of people not wanting to have children is because in Japan, it's difficult to find children who appear to be spending a happy life. For example, if the child screams, then the parents would have to apologize to the people around. If you try to get on a bus with a baby car, then people on the bus may be offended. And it's partly due to the general public not having the peace of mind and the mental tolerance to accept those people. But the parents tend to think that it's their responsibility to apologize to the society. So they cannot really raise children with the peace of mind. And when you look at the children's side, there are more incidents of truancy, incidents of violence, and the children appear to be having a difficult time as they grow up. So it's difficult for parents to draw a bright image of raising a family or raising children. And I think that is part of the reason.
はい、ありがとうございます。それでは次に、同じく、Q&A に寄せられた質問、アナドル通信の、フェルカン記者からの質問を読み上げます。
Thank you very much. Then I will take another question in the Q&A box by Furkan San of Anadolu Agency.
自殺に関する質問ですけれども、It is noteworthy that suicide rates are higher in high school students compared to primary and secondary school students. Will it be possible to reduce these suicide rates with only concrete, visible, and tangible aid and support?
自殺に関する質問ですけれども、高校の方が初等中等教育よりも高等教育の方が、自殺率が高いように見受けられます。具体的で目に見えるサポートでもって自殺率を減らす方法はないんでしょうか？
ちょっと自殺のことについてあまり専門ではないので、的確なお答えができないんですけれども、そうですね、まず、そうですね、声を上げるっていうことが子どもたちに、あまり教えられている。子どもが声を上げていいっていうふうに思っていないんだと思うんですよね。なので、特に高校で勉強がわからないとか、いろいろ悩みがあっても、それを出す場がないしっていうことで、あるいはいじめの対策も十分でないと思っていますし、あとそういう教員のハラスメントのようなこともですね。なので、本当に何が原因かっていうことなど詳しくわからないですけれども、本当に学校が今はその学力向上というようなことで、そういうところにばっかりフォーカスしてますけれども、子どもの心の状況とか、メンタルヘルスのことについてもっともっと学校現場が考えることは多いんじゃないか。その辺は国連にも勧告を受けているところかと思います。
Suicide is not an area of my expertise. Therefore, I am not able to offer any response with any accuracy. But it may be caused by children not being told that it's all right to speak out regarding their problems, that it's okay to voice their concerns. High school students in secondary school may have trouble in getting grades, which they don't think would be right to speak out on. And also support regarding school bullying has not been sufficient. There's harassment over teachers as well. So I cannot pinpoint the root causes of the problems. But there are problems in schools, I believe, as well. There's excessive focus on increasing the competency of learning in schools, so much so that sufficient attention has not been paid to securing the peace of mind of the children and students or the mental education. So the schools have to do more in such area. And in fact, that's one of the recommendations that the United Nations has issued to Japan as well.
はい、ありがとうございます。それでは、これもまた事前の質問の中からもう一つ紹介します。ウォーターシムさんからの質問です。
Thank you very much. Then next, I will introduce another question that has been submitted in advance, again by Mr. Walter Sim.
Some observers have said that given the rising cost of living and the pressure to make ends meet, the idea of raising children has become too unaffordable for many in the sandwiched middle class. Do you agree? And if so, what measures are necessary to reverse this?
物価の上昇と家計への逼迫を考えると、もう救急の中間層の多くの人々にとって子育てをすることが、高くついて割に合わないという指摘がありますが、そのようにお考えでしょうか。もしそのようなお考えでしたら、これを逆転させるためにどのような方策が必要と思いますか。
はい、一つはその教育費が非常に日本ではかかって、それが本当に家計の負担になっているっていう現状があります。で、それに対してはいろいろ海外の状況を見ますと、必ずしもその家庭のそういう塾に行かせるとかそういうことがなくても、いろいろな環境があって、体験ができた、子どもの体験とか勉強を豊かにすることができるんだと思います。で、例えば以前北欧の図書館のお話を伺ったときに、そこには北欧でもその塾というか習い事とかいろいろ習い事する家庭もあるけれども、そこに行けない子のために図書館がいつもオープンで、そこにもういつでも来てご飯も食べたりできるし、そこで勉強を教えてもらったり悩みを聞いてもらったりっていうことで、そこから大学に入っていくなんていう話も伺いまして、日本はそういう今学習支援のボランティアなどもだいぶ増えてきていますけれども、そういうのがボランティアってことじゃなくて、そもそも普通の学校教育を受けてればきちんと進学できるというような、そういう家庭のそういう負担に頼らなくても誰もが子どもが能力を伸ばせるような教育環境を作っていく必要があるというふうに思います。
The cost of education in Japan is truly a heavy burden on households. In other countries, I've heard that there are means to provide for enrichment of the experience of the children without having them have to take extracurricular activities like cram school, prep schools, or taking lessons outside of schools. I heard that some of the Nordic countries are opening their libraries to children, especially to those whose families cannot afford to have them take lessons after school or cannot afford to have their children enroll in special cram schools outside of school, that these children can at any time go to these libraries, even take meals there, and have the staff teach them lessons, ask them questions about their lives as well. And eventually, through these experiences, many such children also proceed to higher education, to colleges and universities. In Japan, we are seeing an increase in the number of volunteers who provide education support, learning support. However, fundamentally, I think there needs to be a system established in Japan that would allow for children who go to schools without going to other prep schools and cram schools, be able to enroll in college and universities just by going to schools without having their parents bear additional cost other than the school tuition.
はい、ありがとうございます。続けて、ウォーターシムさんの質問をもう一問させていただきます。
Thank you very much. I will read another question submitted by Mr. Walter Sim.
The world recently marked its 8 billionth baby, and yet Japan's population is shrinking. Would you say that Japan should be more open to immigration to foster a society where intercultural marriages, childbirth are more accepted?
世界で80億人の赤ちゃんが誕生しましたが、日本は人口がそれでも減少しています。日本はもっと移民を受け入れて、異文化間の結婚、出産を受け入れて、ダイバーシティに富んだ社会を作るべきだと思いますか？
はい、移民についても専門ではないので、はっきりしたことは申し上げられませんけれども、移民をっていうのは、移民はもちろん、そうやって開かれた国にしていくっていう方向も必要だと思うんですが、とりあえず、今、日本にいる子どもたちが、幸せになれるような社会づくりの方に、全然できていないので、そこに力を入れてほしいなと、個人的には思っています。
Now, again, I'm not an expert on immigration matters, and therefore I will not be able to give a clear response to that specific question, although I do hope that we become a country open to immigrants. But at the moment, we'll still are lacking in a society that can offer happiness to children who are currently existing in our society. So personally, I hope that in the first instance, the government can inject more efforts into making this society a place where all children who live in this society can become happy.
はい、ありがとうございます。一つですね、在日イギリス大使館の村越さんからの質問を読み上げたいと思います。
Thank you very much. Next, I would like to read a question submitted by Murakoshi-san of the Embassy of the United Kingdom to Japan.
過去30年の経験から、日本で出生率を増やすために有効な政策だと言えるものは何でしょうか。そもそも結婚が減っているから、出生率が減ってきているという議論がありますが、どのように見ておられますか。
From your experience of the past 30 years, what do you think is the most effective policy in order to increase the number of births in Japan? There are those who say that the number of births is declining because of the number of marriages is declining to begin with. What is your analysis of this issue?
日本がこれまでやってきて、良かったと思うのは、もちろんその女性の就業率をこうやって引き上げてきたっていうこと、それから、そうですね、まだ不十分でありますけれども、 子育て支援というか、その地域で孤立しないように、こうなんていうの、親子でこう集うような場を地域に作っていけたっていうところは、一つ進歩だったと思っていますが、まあ、できていないことが先ほど申し上げたようにたくさんあるわけですね。なので、まあ、今日ちょっとあまりお話ししなかったので問題があると考えているのが、やっぱり教育のことで、やっぱり教育でその自己肯定感が日本はすごく子供も低いっていうことも問題になっていまして、何か自分の意見を言うとか、自分でこう社会を作っていくっていうところの教育が、あまり十分でなんていうか、ないので、それに競争するっていうところにすごく力が入れられてしまっているので、もっと自分たちでこう社会を作っていく、だから家族を作っていくっていうようなことに、こう関心とかこう自信が持てるような教育が必要なんではないかなと。前、ドイツだと子供にデモのやり方を教えているとかですね。要するに、子供たちの声を聞いて社会を変えるっていう感覚が日本は本当にないので、今ある現状が自分が嫌だと思うともそれでは無理だっていうふうに諦めてしまう子が多いので、そういう、自分たちで社会を作っていけるっていう教育にも、今後は、取り組まなきゃいけないというふうに感じています。
What I think were some of the good things that have been done in Japan would include initiatives to increase the employment rate of women and the initiatives to provide fuller, more adequate support for child rearing, although it is not sufficient yet. And some of the municipalities and local governments have offered parents and children to gather together in order to prevent isolation in their communities, which was also a good initiative. But as I mentioned in my presentation, there are so many things that we have not been able to do in Japan. More efforts need to be done, for example, in education. I didn't really touch upon this in the presentation, but in Japan, not much education is provided to teach the children that they themselves can take the initiative to create their own society. And too much focus has been placed on competition, competing to win. But more teaching has to be done to the children that they themselves can make efforts to create families and to create societies, and more interest should be paid there. For example, I heard that in Germany, they teach children on the ways to organize demonstrations. At any rate, I think more attention should be paid to listen to the voices of the children and teaching them that they themselves can take the initiative to change the society, because currently, if they don't like the status quo, many of the children give up. So I think there ought to be more education to the children to have them become more assertive, voice their opinion, and make them learn that they themselves can cause change to the society.
ありがとうございます。時間が過ぎておりますが、最後に私どもに児玉の方から一つお願いいたします。
Thank you very much. Although we have gone overboard the scheduled time, I would like to give the final opportunity to President Kodama of FPCJ to ask a question or make a comment.
はい。山本先生、今日は本当にありがとうございました。私、どうしてもですね、今日のお話を伺ってて、お聞きしたいことができましたので、というのは、先生が最初にまさに美智子も言われた、 日本のこの少子化対策とか女性の活躍に重点を置かれたけれども、実は子どもの権利という観点からの考慮は不十分であったという、もう最初の導入部のそのご指摘は本当にその通りだと思うんですね。で、同時にその点について日本の中で本当にその各方面で十分に議論されてきたかということはおそらく不十分だろうと。で、その一つの例が、これはもう私はもう OECD でも大使をしておりましたし、いろんな OECD の比較とかいうことで、その国際比較ということは私なりに考えてきたんですけれども、ポイントだけ申し上げれば、共同親権か単独親権という問題は一つ考えられないのかなということは、私はずっと考えておりまして、ハーグ条約の問題もありますけれども、結局、単独親権ということは、一方の親が監護権を行使するということであって、そうすると、やっぱり視点は親からの視点であって、つまり子どものからの視点であれば、当然親は2人いるわけであって、それを考えたら、今まさに政府、議論されてますけれども、本当は共同親権ということをもっと真剣に考えることが大切なんじゃないかなと、私は思うんですが、この点について先生のご所見を時間があれでございますけれども、お願いいたします。
Thank you very much, Ms. Ikemoto, for those extremely insightful presentation. And as I had been listening to your presentation, I could not bear but check and ask you one particular question, which has been one of the questions that I've always had in mind. In the initial part of your presentation, you mentioned that focus had been placed on women's empowerment and raising the employment of women, so much so that that had led to insufficient attention being paid to the rights of the child. And I'm completely in agreement to such analysis. And at the same time, there had not been enough debate in Japan regarding that problem. To give you one example, I had been involved in the work at OECD, so I'm quite well aware about the international comparisons and the studies done by the OECD. And I think one cause of that is joint parental right versus a parental right occupied by one single parent. And in Japan, the system is one parent having the total parental right and exercising the supervision right over the child. However, from the child's perspective, there are two parents for the child, and currently there seems to be debate in the government as well. But I believe that joint parental right would be more effective if we are to focus more on the views and the perspectives of the children. But I would be very happy if I could hear your views on this matter.
共同親権のことについては、すみません、全く考えてなかったんですが、お話伺って、本当にその通り、子どもの視点からの検討っていうのが、日本には欠けてるんだなっていうことを思いました。で、本当にだから日本では正しいと思っていることが国際的に見るとずれてるっていうことが本当にあってですね。で、私も最初はもうとにかく女性が働く、で、そのために時間延長保育とか病児保育どうなってるかっていうのを海外に行って取材っていうか話を聞くとですね、そんなに長時間保育所にいるって子供に負担じゃないですかとか、病気の時は子供は親と一緒にいたんじゃないですかっていうふうに言われて、なんでそんな質問をするんですかっていうふうに聞かれて、全然自分にもう女性のこととか、女性が働くことで頭がいっぱいで、子供にとってどうなのかっていう視点が欠けてるなってことをやっぱり思い知らされましたが、日本の中ではまだまだ親にとってどうなのかっていうところで、例えば親の経済的負担軽減とか、そういうところばっかりに話題が集中してしまうので、やっぱり子供にとってどうなのっていうのをいちいち点検していく必要が本当にあるなというふうに思って、それをやはり子ども家庭庁にはしっかりやっていただきたいなと思っています。
Now, joint parental rights is something that had never been on my mind, but having listened to your comment, I was very much persuaded. But that is another evidence that we are lacking in terms of thinking from the children's position or children's perspective. What Japan, I think, was right might have been inconsistent with the global standard. When I first began to do research overseas for policies to allow women to work longer hours and thus prolonging the business hours of childcare centers and having more childcare facilities accept sick children, I asked these questions when I visited overseas to do the research, and they asked me back saying, don't you think that it would be too heavy a burden on the children if they were forced to stay at the daycare centers for such long hours? Don't you think that sick children would prefer to spend time with their parents rather than being forced to go to the daycare center when they are sick? I don't understand why you are asking such questions. That was the reaction from the daycare centers overseas. And that was really an eye-opener because I was doing this research preoccupied by this thought that we need to have women work for longer hours. And I myself was lacking in terms of the perspective from the children's standpoint. Too much attention has been placed on having to mitigate the economic burden on the parents. And so far, the debate has concentrated only on those points. But what about the children's perspective? I think each issue has to be checked and analyzed from the children's position. And I truly hope that the Child and Family Affairs Agency to be inaugurated will do exactly that.
はい、それでは予定の時間が過ぎておりますので、これで本日のブリーフィングを終了とさせていただきたいと思います。池本さんには、お忙しい中、長時間いただきまして、どうもありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. We've already gone overboard the time, and therefore this will be the end of today's briefing. Once again, we would like to thank Ms. Ikemoto for joining us despite the very busy schedule. Thank you very much.
ご参加いただいた記者の皆様、その他の皆様もどうもありがとうございました。
To the journalists and other participants, thank you for joining this event.
それではこれで終了とさせていただきます。
This will be the end of the event. Thank you.